evening, viewers, and welcome to the Tobago CivilNet Conversation with the Candidates. And this is episode 5 coming to you as we speak to people participation, imperatives for good governance. Today, we will have the opportunity to chat with 4 candidates in the Tobago House of Assembly upcoming election. Natisha Charles Pantin, PDP candidate for Bagatelle Bacolet. Leroy George, the IDA candidate for Lambo Lowlands. Kay Trotman, the IDA candidate for Bonaccord Crown Point. And Pastor Terence Baines, current assemblyman, the PDP's candidate for Bethel Newgrange. Pastor Baines, I also almost said there Bethel Moncturville. You know, in Tobago, we still accustomed to that. Folks, just before we get into the full flow this evening, I want to encourage you. This is the Tobago CivilNet, a non-partisan group of Tobago civil society organizations and concerned citizens, all combining forces for the purpose of having collective input in Tobago's development. Some of the key partners include Youth Votes Matters, Tobago Writers Guild, Tobago Entrepreneurs, Tobago Literacy Support, and the Environment Tobago. This evening, I want to remind you, of course, we are in that season. And as the Tobago CivilNet continues to facilitate these very important conversations as we approach the December 6th THA elections, it is important for us to note from the standpoint of the CivilNet that the views and opinions expressed by all participants on this Tobago CivilNet forum do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the Tobago CivilNet, its directors, officers, nor members. So any errors, false facts, or seemingly controversial opinions and views remains the responsibility of each participant. Today, I also want to take the opportunity to remind you that we are talking to candidates for the Tobago House of Assembly election 2021. And this is a gentle reminder that the Tobago CivilNet continues to be a non-partisan group of Tobago civil society organizations concerned with working together and combining forces for the development of our island, Tobago. As I said earlier, this is Conversations with the Candidates, and today we are discussing people participation, imperative for good governance. Folks, I am Hulien Skeete, and I am happy to be here with you this evening to moderate this evening's session. And allow me to take this opportunity to say thank you to the Tobago CivilNet for giving me that opportunity to join the conversation from the perspective of that of a moderator. So we get straight into our questions and discussions this evening. We want to remind all our viewers, this is your opportunity to share the live, like and share. Let's ensure that we get the information far and wide. This is where you put the link into your WhatsApp conversation and you broadcast it to your entire line of friends and family to ensure that they tune in to this episode of Conversations with the Candidates. So we begin the discussion this evening as we're talking people participation. Let's start by looking specifically at the definition of good governance coming from the perspective of the PDP as well as the perspective of the IDA. So who's going to start us off from the PDP? Well, then let me put Pastor on the spot. Pastor, you know when you have been there as the assemblyman and others and newcomers, Pastor, you get called out all the time. So Pastor, tell me your perspective as somebody who has been in your electoral district as a current assemblyman regarding good governance. What is your definition of good governance?
Well, I think it has to be the delivery of the ideas, the views, coupled with some of those ideas and views of the representatives. And there has to be a confluence of these ideas and a working and doing due diligence to see and to deliver those ideas to the population. It cannot and must not be deficient in the sense that it cannot have a single focus. It cannot focus on one geographic location or one type of problem. It has to be an assessment of the entire island the kind of delivery that is required for the entire island, looking at all the communities. Some may have more acute problems than others, but there's got to be an understanding of these needs and then a program fashioned to facilitate those needs and to deliver it. But I want to say that that program cannot and must not be solely designed by those in the executive. There must be conversation and feedback and input from the people that we are saying to represent.
All right. Thank you very much there, Pastor Terence Baines. And let me also invite Kate Trotman to give us your perspective from the standpoint of the IDA. How do you define good governance?
Good governance speaks to the need for having a social arrangement that allows for the people's needs and the needs of the community to be met in a manner that is equitable, transparent, timely, efficient, under the rule of law, so to speak, and not at the whims and fancy of men. And it's done in a fashion that allows the responsiveness of the state to be seen. So good governance speaks to or implies that there is a social contract that exists that defines how the organization of the state and its relationship with the people it serves happens.
All right. So what would be some of those principles that we will utilize, of good governance specifically in Tobago? Because we're bringing it home, obviously. If you were to identify a few of those, what would you speak to as some of the principles of good governance here in Tobago?
Representation, representation, representation. Tobagonians want to see the folks who are going up on their behalf. They want to see the people to whom they are giving their proxy to, so that they must be in tune with what the desires are of the people that they're willing to serve, so to speak. So that is one of the key issues for me in terms of good governance.
All right. I want to bring in Natisha into the conversation here to give us a sense of how do you distinguish governance from leadership?
Well, before I go to that question, I just want to point out that good governance, I would say it's based on two pillars: accountability and consequence. So you must have, records and account for, money spent. And of course, there must be consequence, not only, to live in the legal sense, but also where projects are not completed on time or completed in terms of value to the constituents, right? There must be some sort of consequence that comes to accountability. Governance and leadership. I think they're both related in that you have to be that type of leader to listen to your constituent, to be able to communicate that within, that body of people that represent government, and able to translate to the constituent or to work together with the constituent so that we're able to achieve whatever goal that the constituent expect from the Executive Council. But leadership, when I think about leadership, to be honest, I always viewed a leader, someone as inspiring, someone who could motivate you to do better, So I always felt like Obama was the ideal leader. When I sat there listening to a speech from Obama, I would get silent, and automatically, it would move some sort of emotion within you. Governance requires, understanding what accountability is and understanding what representation is about. So that is the difference between both of them, in my view.
All right. So you're giving us a different kind of perspective there in terms of the coming together. Leroy, I want to get you into the mix here as well. How do you distinguish the difference between governance and leadership?
Mm-hmm. For me, leadership is something that has to be done from the front. Governance, not necessarily so. If you're a good leader, then you're setting an example, because whatever you are requiring from those who you lead, you would be doing that even more so than they are doing it on your command. What governance can be done, and well, from behind. However, there will be some separation in terms of what is expected from the person governing and what is expected from the persons following. In my personal opinion, good governance is not as good as good leadership, but it's still good.
I would want to say, to add, if I may, Mr. Skeete, that governance now speaks to the system of control, the system that is in place to organize, direct, point, guide. Whereas leadership now speaks to the individuals who will be guiding and steering that ship that is directing how the players orchestrate themselves and move, so that they're interrelated in that there needs to be that partnership in it. For good governance to happen, it means you ought to have good leaders. Because good leaders would have instituted the kind of systems, institutions, processes necessary to allow for the process of directing to happen in a manner that benefits all.
To be able to guide the process. I want to throw out our panel. It's a very interesting perspective. Unfortunately, we don't have any representatives from the current, in terms of administration as is, on the panel. And it's important for me to just note for the viewers that the Tobago Civil Net would have extended an invitation to all political parties to participate. However, it is my understanding through the Tobago Civil Net that the PNM, the People's National Movement, have declined participation. So just for the benefit of our viewers. But the next question I want to raise speaks to, can we cite examples right here in our Tobago space of behaviors demonstrating good governance? Would any of you want to venture in that direction? And if not local, then perhaps foreign. But I know that Natisha started by speaking to her looking at in terms of Barack Obama. But I want to give an opportunity. Do we have scenarios here of good, or let's say bad governance by virtue of your definition?
Based on what I consider good governance, I would want to say in our space, we tend to see more of the latter. Governance that is questionable, in the sense that one of the pillars of good governance, as my learned colleague indicated, Natasha, is accountability. And in our space, we have been seeing that the whole issue of accountability is quite questionable. We are also seeing that level of responsiveness that is also a pillar of good governance. Why is it that we always have to wait until the time of elections to see our representatives respond to us in terms of our needs being met? We constantly see every 4 years before election happens, roads are being paved, businesses are being assisted just on the eve. That level of responsiveness does not speak to good governance. In fact, some people would like to think that that falls in the category of bribery, so to speak. And I would believe our citizens deserve more than that. So in our local space, we tend to be seeing more of the trending towards what is not necessarily good governance.
I like how you're trying to avoid saying bad key, but not a problem. What is trending towards what is not good governance? Pastor Terrence Baines, tell us, Assemblyman, you currently sit in what is considered the 12 assemblymen representing the interests of Tobago. Can you say with any degree of certainty that you can cite local examples in terms of behaviors demonstrating good or bad governance?
Well, the governance that we have been exposed to in more recent times, and perhaps it is even more accentuated in the last 10 months or so, is nothing short of just bad governance that continues to get worse. All right. And I think it was Kay that was saying earlier that we operate within certain parameters. There are certain rules and regulations that you're supposed to. If you're going to have any kind of sensible organization, you have to have rules by which you operate. And when you who know the rules, you blatantly violate those rules, and you continue to do that with impunity, you understand? I think that we have to kind of call it as it is. And we have to be honest, a lot of the emotions and a lot of the temperature of the Tobago society is surrounding that kind of emotion, that really the governance has really gone down the drain. You know, and we don't have to look far to see that. You know, the evidence is in this space, by how they handle social relief, by how they handle accounting for basic things, and we are not the ones that are putting those queries out there. The experts that are saddled with that responsibility are reporting to the public that these officials that we have put there and to manage our resources and so on are not following the rules that they're supposed to follow. And so we have that. I think as well, bad governance has become a kind of subculture in Tobago, where it has become acceptable by too many people. You know, I don't know, I'm not sure it is the larger percentage of the people, but by too many people, further by too many sensible people, you understand? And I suspect it is because there are some people that benefit immensely from bad governance, you understand? You know, and maybe it is safe to say that bad governance only benefits a few, when good governance is designed to benefit all, you see? And there is need at this point for us to revisit this whole thing and to do away with this whole thing altogether and have a new governance regime. There is need for a new governance architecture in this space that we now call Tobago.
Well, I see your colleague, Natisha, shaking her head. And it takes me straight to my next question, because you touched on something very important. How do we do away with and make a change? Go ahead, Leroy. Let me get Leroy before I move on there. Leroy, you have something to add. Go ahead.
Yes, certainly. While I would agree with everyone that we've been getting consistent bad governance for a while now, for at least 2 decades or so, I think it would be unfair to pretend as though there was no examples of good governance. And I would like to compare one example of what I would consider good governance, at least okay governance, versus bad governance. When Mr. Orville London was Chief Secretary, he sought to organize the Tobago Autonomy Bill. And he used 2 ingredients that are imperative whenever you are seeking good governance. He used transparency and he used consultation. And as a result of it, we had the 2018 Tobago Self-Government Bill. Now, after he left office, a new administration under the same political party came into office, and the autonomy issue was taken away from the people of Tobago. The self-governance bill that Mr. Orville London would have presented was shelved, and we saw that the Joint Select Committee provided 2 bills to counter the present bill, which is Act 40 of 1996. And we can clearly see that that was an example of bad governance. And the members of the Joint Select Committee seemed confused as to why Tobago rejected those 2 bills. And I would suggest to them that had they done what Orville London did and engaged in consultation with the people, then they would have probably had more of a listening ear from the people of Tobago.
I wonder if I could...
A very interesting perspective there. Let me allow Pastor Terence Payne to go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to revisit my statement, how I prefaced it. I spoke specifically about in recent times. And while Mr. George's point of view regarding Mr. London and maybe, but I can also cite that even under Mr. London's tenure, there were some things that didn't really represent good governance either. You understand? But because of how it is accentuated in this present dispensation, this is where I'm aiming my guns, actually, you understand? So I'm not going all the way back there, but presently we are in a governance crisis in this place, and we need to try and fix this.
Well, it therefore takes us to what is, of course, very timely in the discussion. And, you know, I'd be interesting to get some perspectives on, based on what we're speaking to about inclusion and consultation. And that's what I'm getting when I hear from yourself, Pastor Terence Beans, and also from Leroy. The question, therefore, that I'm putting forward is, how can we get greater participation by people? Because we are definitely saying that people are important in the governance process as we speak to people participation today. So the question is, how can we get greater participation by people in the governance of Tobago so that people understand it goes beyond just voting in December and waiting 4 years later to decide whether or not your current assemblyman has performed? Let me ask Leroy to start us off on that. How can we get greater participation by people in the governance of Tobago, and then we go to Natisha?
It starts with using and utilizing the fact that the 5th Schedule in Act 40 of 1996 puts education as one of the 33 responsibilities that fall under the Tobago House of Assembly, and in particular curriculum. What we have to do, we have to teach our students from as early as primary school, and maybe even earlier if possible, in the lightest ways possible, about how our system works and how it is supposed to work, and get them involved in conversations from a very young age so that they grow up having ideas that are accurate as to what should be happening when they elect someone into office. Because I think that a lack of knowledge is the core of why we're not getting as much participation. Also, they're not consulting. But if we as a people were more politically knowledgeable, then they would have to consult us, because we would understand that consultation is absolutely necessary in good governance.
All right, Natisha?
I agree with Leroy. Leroy George. I apologize. I know Leroy so well that I call him Leroy. You know,
well, one of the things is in this conversation, we want to keep it very informal as we engage on social media with persons. So we don't want to get into too much of the formalities. So go ahead for me, Natisha.
All right, I agree with Leroy. I believe education is key, especially from a young age, understanding how the government functions. But I also believe that we can start some way, like developing a policy and research institute, for example. We can also develop a system where we could monitor the awarding of government contracts. We can have a performance audit unit. Right? So those strengthening the system could work. Could it do some improvement to what currently exists?
So you're speaking to a broader kind of strengthening for the system within which we operate. All right? Kay or Pastor Terence, anything to add there?
Let me step back a little bit.
I think.
All right. So let me go with Kay first, and then I'll have Pastor Terence.
Okay.
Go ahead,
I was saying we needed to step back a little bit as well. Yes, I agree that we need to start young and in schools. Yes, I agree we need to strengthen systems. But where we are at now, the experience that our people have had with how governance has happened has actually dulled their sense of wanting to be involved in even directing their own space. They have become so fed up with what has been given as governance that from the time you talk about giving people the ability to contribute and direct to their own space and their own well-being, they're not interested in the politics. I don't talk politics. We seem to think that politics, because of how it has happened, is such a bad word that we close the door to the good that good politics can bring to us as a people. And that is part of the change that needs to happen now. Participation by people in governance can happen in various kinds of civil organizations, just as CivilNet, within the school. The whole issue of volunteerism, getting involved in what is happening in your space. We need to, through conversations and talking, reawaken in people that we, the people, are the ones that need to make the change. We can't sit and wait. And even though we have been battered and bruised by what we call poor politics, if it has to change, it is not just going to change because the politicians decide it is going to change. It is changed because the people decide it is going to change. Even when we fed up of the process and the system, we the people will change it. It starts, one, you see with this finger that we are about to dip, that is one of the ways it starts. So even though we fed up with what we have, we start there, yes.
But
can I jump in there?
How do we, just before you go, Natisha, I also want to ask Kay, how do we get people to that mindset to move just beyond the vote? Because the vote is one thing, and one can say, if we look at our national landscape, and we would all remember when there was a massive move, by the another party to remove the current administration at a national level. And then people complain that the plan was so good to remove that you forget to plan for, when I remove them, what are going to do next? So how do we get persons to move beyond just the vote?
We need to understand, and that is why I dare say the alliances of parties coming together just to remove a party does not necessarily work. We have to think beyond that. We have to consciously choose to think beyond that and plan for what are we going to replace it with. So our conversations have always been, we're going to just get rid of them. We can't just get rid of them. We have to get rid of them and be committed to replacing it with something else that is better and serves us. And the general population need to understand it is not just the politicians to do this. It is going to take all of us to do this. When we talk about governance, we implied that there is leadership and that there's a followership per se by the fact that we have given proxy to leaders to guide on our behalf. And because we have given them our proxy to guide on our behalf, hey, we are still the ones that control that proxy. And when you come out of line, you are going to be dealt with in a manner that says you haven't come up to scratch, you can be replaced, and you will be replaced. It also calls for a population that thinks about where it wants to go. And while that is going to come from an awareness, and we need to have institutions that brings that kind of civic awareness, education and awareness programs that brings that sense of pride and culture in the space that we call our own. We have to decide that in order for better to happen, we have to construct system and construct an environment for better to happen. It is not just for one sector of the society to make the change. So I am championing at this point in time to the population that the voters, you also have a part to play in making the change and replacing it with something better to serve you. It is not just the job of those of us who have put ourselves forward to serve you. You also have a responsibility. So if we each recognize that responsibility that we have and take hold of that, then our social contract becomes even stronger.
All right. And let me then, I'm sure that Pastor Baines will give way to Natisha first, and then I will come back to him. And Natisha, go ahead. I know you wanted to add something here based on the conversation.
Well, based on what Kay, she was saying that, the culture of politics that we have, if we look at the culture, it tends to turn off people. We don't trust politicians. People don't trust politicians. And if the government would come out and say, okay, we made a mistake and we'll try to do things, the correct way, to consult with you more, to fix things, that would work. But instead, you get the poor politics. Let me put it like that. And when Kay, she was speaking a while ago, it took me back to a household I went in Friendsfield. I was speaking to a very pleasant lady. She's a cancer survivor. And she told me that the government started a brace wall behind her house in the days of Pochoy, and it stopped. And she was on the verge of tears. She said every administration that came after, she spoke about this brace wall, and I saw all the damages to her property and to the neighboring properties, and she was so. I wondered what motivated her, it keeps inspiring her to talk to a politician when she was speaking to me, right? Every time somebody comes to her gallery, it's a promise, and this is her last chance at talking to someone to see if someone will do something about it. So yes, people, and they started, becoming, disenchanted with politicians. So I agree, Kay, right? There must be consequence. If you don't have consequence to what we're doing in government, then we're going to continue failing the people of the country.
All right. Pastor Terence, how do we get a greater involvement of our people in the governance of Tobago?
Yes. Well, in an idealistic situation, of course, it will require both the persons who hire you for the job and you who are hired to do the job. The Tobago scenario is not an ideal one, and so therefore the prescription will have to be a little different. What has happened is leaders have redefined the meaning of representation as the first thing. That they have redefined that. They have their own meaning, and with that redefining, you find that the people, a disconnect just came between the people that hire them and them in that position. And you have this executive board that makes these executive decisions and so on, sometimes completely almost oblivious of the needs and some of the concerns of the people. I think in the Tobago scenario, in order for us to rectify this, the leaders have to be a part of this evangelism, because it is going to take, because of how the construct of Tobago. Remember, we are in a society where the government employs over 60% of the workforce, right? And people are gun shy even to give an opinion because of how they've been threatened, their livelihood have been threatened and so on. Even people who are business people, there's been almost a preemptive strike against the private sector in this place we call Tobago, because leaders know that once people are independent, they could tell you that they don't like what you're doing. You understand? They could challenge you. They could say they're not voting for you because the road to have no pass through their yard, your yard. You understand what I'm saying? So some leaders, they set out and chart a course to become the public service lords. You understand? And that is how they control the population. They control it, because once you come to people's bread and butter, they will toe the line. You see. So let us assume if we had a thriving private sector in Tobago and so on, where people in those types of positions could speak out openly to foolishness when it is taking place and can garner other people and that kind of thing, and you have a movement like that where it pressures these officials to behave differently. You understand? But in the present situation, there is no such pressure. I mean, there are some of us that are brave enough, some of us perhaps can even be deemed to be reckless to stand up against some of the things that are taking place. But I think ideally what is required now are some leaders who understand this thing and want to change it. So they in turn are saying, okay, we shall engage the population, because there is a lot of work has to be done to rebuild public confidence as well. People are not accustomed trusting their representatives. They're not accustomed giving their views and see their views show up in any policy. You understand what I'm saying? No matter how much they talk to politicians just go ahead and they have their caucus and make the decisions and whatever, and people are left out in the cold. That is one of the contributors to this disillusionment that we see in and around the various communities, where people, young people, intelligent people are supposed to be a part of the process, wants nothing to do with it because they feel that they've been locked out of this whole process. You understand? So I think in our situation, there is need, and of course, yes, with the assistance of NGOs and stuff like that, but the leaders themselves in this present dispensation have to lead from the front to sensitize the communities and so on, and to bring them on board. And that is so that we can create a different kind of climate. You understand? And the education that Mr. George spoke about will take root more effectively, because the truth is, if you educate somebody and you don't give them the platform to manifest that education, you're really back to square one. You understand? So there has to be a creating of the kind of environment for those things that you teach them to thrive. You understand? So my view is, at this point, for us to get that rectified, it won't take some work, and this is why the caliber of representatives, the caliber of people that we put in these places has to be a matter of paramount importance. Somebody that before you put them in that position, that is involved in that kind of work, that is involved with people and so on. So I think that will aid us.
Yeah, Pastor Terence, I want to put you on the spot a little further, because from the discussions that we've been hearing, and specifically to what you are speaking to, I want to add to the question to ask either yourself or Natisha in terms of responding, coming from one of our online viewers. The question speaks to whether or not there's agreement with implementing, and the main question behind it is we need the right to recall our politicians when they are not performing. So therefore, the question is, do you agree?
Yes, and we need a whole legislative overhaul. That is just one. We need a whole legislative overhaul. But I'm saying, in order for us, that is why it is critical, because for us to have legislation like that, that has to be something that the people that you hire see this as something that is necessary for us to rebuild this thing that we have here. Because if you hire people and they don't have the political will to do that, you're not going to have that done. We have been having this conversation about recall eons, but the crop of leaders that have come into the space don't see that as something important. Men want to know that if they've been hired, that whether you like how they're doing the work or not, they stay in the hired seat until the time has expired. You understand? But I feel that and other supporting legislative change is going to severely impact the quality of representatives that we have. I think a lot of times the system that we are operating by now give a lot of representatives a slap on the hand. You understand? For bad behavior. There are no consequences whatsoever. And therefore, people do all kinds of things. So there is need for a robust kind of governance architecture, and something that the individuals, the officials buy into or agree upon before we even get into a place of governance. You understand?
And if I wanted to jump off a little bit from Pastor Baines, it speaks to the need for a new crop of politicians who do not see their journey in politics as one for a power struggle, of one to garner, because politics speaks to that whole issue of a structure of power. And when people get drunk on power, they do not let it go. Your crop of politicians that you need right now, especially in this space, to make the changes that needs to happen, that COVID has so forcefully thrust us into, must be politicians, and I use that word in inverted commas, that are not driven by their own personal self-interest, that they cannot see the need to do their part in making the change and possibly move on. But make the transition. Right now, we need transitional politicians that are willing, come what may in terms of my political career, the decisions and the choices that I would have to make to ensure that a change happens, and the kind of institutions that need to be created or nurtured are institutions to the better of all, which means it will shake some power structure, it will shake some economic structure. I must be, as a politician right now, willing to say, it doesn't matter if at the end of this 4-year term, I am not put back there because some power structure that exists now would have been shaking in bouncing back to respond to this change that we are going about. Because let me tell you something, the structures that exist are not going to roll over and allow change to happen, because I think it was Pastor Baines who indicated that some profit off of the way things are. And you are now talking about shaking that up. And shaking that up may mean for you personally as a politician that you have a limited shelf time.
I think what you are speaking to looks at the political behavior, particularly in our Tobago landscape. And the question is, if I am to be very frank about it, all politicians come with an excellent talk in a time like now and in this period about serving the people, and they are the best for the people, and they want to make a difference for the people. And if you have been there and you fail the people, you also come with the talk that I plan to do better this time around. My question is, how do people better distinguish to make that decision with regards to who is best to serve their needs at this time?
You see, if you was there before, if you was the only time, you had a track record. We're judging you by your track record. If you wasn't there before, you can't judge me by a track record that doesn't exist in that area. What you can judge me by, however, is after 4 years, I've never been there. I made the promise, I made the good talk. Give it a chance. You know what you had before in a working field. Give somebody else the opportunity to prove you wrong that they are good politicians. There can be good politicians out there. They don't come out to scratch. You had the power in your finger to move them. And as the teacher said, if there are consequences to the actions of politicians, politicians will know that, hey, when we get into here and we say we're serving people and we're representing people, we will have to do it, because the time will be coming where you would have to pay for that. So that you cannot come and bribe me a couple of months before the election by giving me what I was asking for the last 4 years and expect because you give me that, you're going to get the vote. I will take it and I will still vote you out. Once we get to that stage that the people recognize that is the power they have, then I tell you politicians will come into tow and will have to, no choice for their own survival, have to create a different platform and a different environment to operate in.
All right, Leroy? Yeah. Go ahead, Leroy.
Yeah, Mr. Skeete, before you move on to another question, I just want to highlight the fact that I didn't have an opportunity to address the question that everybody else addressed, which is how to get person.
You go ahead.
Right, which is how to get person more involved. I'm gonna give Pastor Baines a moment to catch himself.
I'm sorry. Carry on.
Right. So if if you look historically, my colleague, she would have made mention of the fact that, and also Pastor Baines would have made mention of the fact that politicians, basically they're out there to serve their own needs, etc., etc. And what I would suggest is that the devil finds wood for idle hands. When you look at times past, when Trinidad and Tobago was moving towards independence, you would see higher voter turnout, especially just before we became independent. I'm talking 1956, I'm talking 1961. You had voter turnouts as high as 80 and 88%. And even before that, you would have seen a constant growing from 50-some% all the way until it reached 88% just before independence. And what I see as a commonality is that every single election, we moved a little closer to independence. And so there was a commonly held goal. And because there was a commonly held goal, not just amongst the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, but amongst the political figures of Trinidad and Tobago, because they may have been competing against each other, but they knew that they had to compete whilst at the same time staying on that path that had been set by not just themselves, but also the people, which is independence. Because of that, there was greater conversation taking place on all different levels. And so what I would say is that we need to find a commonly held goal for all Tobagonians. Right now, that topic is autonomy. We were heading in that direction for a while. We came off of that direction, and I'm going to suggest that we get back on that direction, because even adults who would have passed through the school system, if they feel enfranchised in the conversation, then they are going to find ways, because there is different types of education. You have the formalized education, but you also have life experience education, and they're going to get involved in that conversation. Remember, back in those days, previous to independence, persons were not as academically inclined, but they were involved. That's how you get people involved. Have a commonly held goal.
So Leroy, I want to follow on from that, because I like the point that you have made, Leroy, in terms of one of the suggested topics to bring that common connection is the talks of autonomy, not so?
Yes, sir.
So the question I want to put to you, I follow all the political parties, and I have heard quite recently, after coming out of what took place over the last few months about the parties coming together, we have heard the political leader of the PNM giving a commitment that when the PNM is returned to office, she will march if she has to. She will fight for the autonomy. Do we therefore take that as a promise, Leroy? Because if that is the common goal, so even if I have seen something before, and now I am hearing that promise, how do you then respond to that as a candidate presenting yourself? She is speaking to what you are suggesting.
Right. Now, before I answer that question, I want to ask you a question. Are you saying that the fact that she's obviously being opportunistic in her approach to autonomy, that we should not take her seriously or not encourage her down that particular path? Because if that is what we're saying, I would disagree with that. I am saying opportunism, we are politicians. We are opportunistic by nature, right? You go out there, you collect votes, you have to be persuasive in your language and all of that. However, what we need to do is have different perspectives brought to the people to say, listen, this idea of autonomy that this person has, it's not good if it's not good, or I have a better idea. Because I would guess if Ms. Tracy Davidson Celestine is pushing for autonomy, because of the nature of the relationship between the PNMB team and central government PNM, she's probably pushing for that JSC version of autonomy, which is not autonomy at all. From what I'm seeing, it may actually be a backward move. And so the other parties need to present their idea of what autonomy should look like. But I won't say discourage the conversation altogether just because she's being opportunistic. Let's continue the conversation. That is what we did between 1946 and 1961. That is what worked between 1946 and 1961, and it's what's going to work going forward. Let's stick to the topic, irrespective of who's saying what, and let's see if we could get that autonomy for Tobago, because it will result in an increased standard of living for all of us.
So, but I think, Leroy, you didn't answer my question. What I was alluding to, based on the fact that you said this should be one of the common issues, And I'm saying the political leader for the PNM also said that. Is that something the idea would be prepared to partner with the institution on to go forward to fight for?
Of course, these conversations take place in the chamber. And so the answer to that question, of course, we're going to engage in that conversation, but we're going to engage in it in the chamber, which is the appropriate place, which is the place where bills are oftentimes made, or at least find their genesis. So yes, the answer to that question is yes, but there's a right time and place for it. I don't think we in the idea are as opportunistic as the leader of the PNM team, and as a result of it, we're going to exercise some decorum and understanding of time and place.
Yeah, this is an important point for me to remind all our viewers that the views expressed by all participants are certainly their direct responsibility, whether it is the PDP or the IDA. All right, so the question I want to bring in, Natisha, in the conversation on would speak directly to, does the manner in which politics is conducted in our central government have an effect on our THA political climate? And if so, how? Natisha?
Interesting question. Yes and no. All right, let me explain why I'm saying both. Now, I believe that the PDP, we have a niche. We have created a niche, and to some extent, IDA, right? I believe that both parties sort of, focus on Tobago politics. But the PNM is a national party. You have PNM in Trinidad and PNM in Tobago. So obviously you will have the Trinidad influence on the Tobago, PNM. But you'd only have PDP in Tobago. And that is why the PDP has been saying over and over again to be the PDP is a Tobago-based party. But Julian, I wanted to bring out a point before we started to speak about autonomy. When you do a shabby job, in the real world, you're not rehired. And in some instances, when some mistakes are irreversible. Let us look at the health sector, for example. And I am sure I'm not the only person that would have experienced this. There are many other examples within our society. You go to the hospital, you have a poor experience. People would have been waiting for surgeries for years. People would have died and never gotten a surgery. And, families would have felt the loss of a baby. I've heard recently about a guy holding his dead baby because of something lacking in the health system. And it's not because, the doctors didn't try, but just the system needs strengthening. And that is why I said earlier, we need to strengthen the institutions that we have. Otherwise, we're going to end up with mistakes that are irreversible. And you may very well suffer from not doing what is right when you had the opportunity to serve, when you had the power. I have seen this happen time and time again. You believe that you're financially stable until you meet a situation where your money cannot help you and you have to fall within the system. So wisdom for you to collaborate with people, understand their experiences, and then strengthen the system to serve them better. And you in turn will benefit from this strengthening. All right, so that is the point I wanted to make earlier.
Julian, if I can step back a little bit into the issue going before with autonomy. And to dare say that all the things that we need to do to address and to put Tobago on a different trajectory also takes us right back to the beginning of our conversation when you asked the difference between governance and leadership, if they are related. And therefore, all of these things that we're looking at in terms of what we have to address also stems from the impetus that is going to come from the leadership. what is the quality, what is the direction, what is the character of our leaders, because your leadership sets the tone for the rest of the team. So it is not just the individual representatives per se, it is also the leader. And what is the tone being set by leadership that spills down or embraces the rest, the representative, to get that team that is necessary to drive the process. So leadership. And so in this election, I dare say, we need to check the leadership. We need to look at the leadership of all these parties. We need for ourselves to determine who can we trust, who is credible, who really has the heart of the people, who speaks to the people, who listens to the people, and who is organizing themselves to meet the need of the people. So our leadership is a critical, very critical pillar in this upcoming election. And I dare say, in the direction we need to take as we try to bring some degree of sanity to this space that we have in Tobago.
So then I want to ask the question, and I want to put it to both the IDA and the PDP. Why should people select the leadership of the IDA in the person of Dr. Denise Sawyer-Fat-Angus? And that's not 30 seconds, because we can't give you the whole night for that.
If I may address that one, please.
Yes.
All right. So one representative to address it for me. Go ahead, Leroy. You are the man for this, and then Pastor Baines and Natisha will tell me who would address it for the PDP, why we should select Farley. Go ahead.
We have 3 chief sec candidates. We have Tracy Davidson Celestine, and we have seen a track record. She did work as the ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago in Costa Rica for a while. I have not seen any increase in trade or anything like that coming out of that situation. I haven't seen any results coming out of that situation. She was a secretary before. I believe it was tourism. We know the infamous zipline situation. We have also Assemblyman Farley Chavez Augustine. When it comes to experience, I don't think there's much to begin to speak about. And then also we have Dr. Denise Sawyer-Fat-Angus. Dr. Denise Sawyer-Fat-Angus, we are right now in a pandemic, and we have a general practitioner seeking to become chief sec candidate. Also, the Division of Health gets a way larger share of the budget than other divisions. And as a result of that, I would think that as we go forward, Tobagonians, as we go forward, we want to have someone who understands legislature and understands health at the same time. And that's why I'm really happy that even though I'm going up for Lambo Lowlands, I'll have an opportunity to vote for Dr. Denise Sawyer-Fat-Angus as my chief sec candidate.
All right. And I similarly want to hear from either Natisha or Pastor Baines. If we're going down that path, we have leadership. And of course, in this instance, your political leader is not vying for the chair of chief secretary. So I'm not asking you to speak to that. I am interested in your chief secretary candidate, which is the deputy political leader. Why should we select Farley Chavez Augustine?
Well, if I may, Natisha,
Sure.
Mr. Augustine is a well-learned and a well-rounded gentleman. He has a very acid grasp of legislative matters. And based on our personal interaction, he's somebody that we all trust to carry this baton and so on. And we have been able to build a cohesive type of team and knit our minds and hearts together. The issues that we have discussed here tonight about people participation and so on, he represents the epitome of those things. And I am satisfied, we are satisfied, as a matter of fact, that he's as good a chief secretary candidate as any and better than many. And so that is how we feel about that, and we respect other person's views as well. But we are confident that he possesses all the qualities that can be manifested into a very, very good chief secretary in the Tobago space in this time that we live.
And Julian,
Right.
if you would allow me just
So,
one
no,
second to
one
sum
each,
up.
one each. So I'm not allowing any further with that. One each. So folks, what I want to continue with is to remind our viewers via social media that you can send in your questions. We are including those in the discussion as well. And I want to use the opportunity to send a little commendations, because one of our viewers has said they congratulate the candidates on their civility towards their opponents, which is rare on the world stage. The young people are certainly taking notice. So commendations to the four of you thus far in the discussion. People are very pleased with that. Now, where I want to go to with the discussion is politicians fight to win seats to represent the people as assemblymen. But if they win and are in the winning party, they seem to spend more time working as secretaries and not as representatives. What do you see as the pros and cons of this situation? Is there a better way? How do we get around that to ensure that while you may have a secretarial responsibility as the winning party, your first and foremost responsibility is to the people that elected you? Who wants to take the first shot at that?
I cannot see much pros. I could only see, I do see one pro, and it's not really a pro. There's more cons to it. The fact of the matter is everybody gets 24 hours a day. You become an assemblyman, you become a secretary, no one gives you extra hours. And as a result of that, you're not going to be able to serve both offices to the best. And as a result of that, I would suggest that the power is spread a little bit thinner, and that is going to require some rearrangement of the Tobago House of Assembly. And especially now, because now you have 15 assemblymen in contrast to 12 assemblymen, and we still have the same number of divisions, right? So what you're going to have some assemblymen who do not have the ability to employ, do not have the ability to do certain things, but they have the time and ability to sit in their constituency offices and serve the people, while you have a whole other half of them, basically, that do not have the time to serve their constituencies, but they have the ability to create employment, perhaps create some infrastructural improvements, etc. And so again, autonomy is an issue that we can't let go of, because there should be some reshaping of the Tobago House of Assembly, and there needs to be consultation and transparency in that reshaping.
So I understand Leroy's point there in terms of making some change. Let me get Natisha.
It's interesting.
How do we deal with that?
That is the culture that currently exists. But I believe that it can be changed based on Leroy's recommendation, but also political will. You have to find ways of meeting your constituents, whether you keep regular town hall meetings, going to your constituency office, even if it means doing like what Zia is doing in Plymouth and Golden Lane and these areas, putting up a tent with a table, sitting down, inviting the whole of social media, putting flyers in every business place. You have to become creative as a representative, because you are serving the people, they hired you. So you have to find a way, even if it means going house to house regularly, just like when you're going house to beg for your vote, you have to find ways to collaborate with your constituents, right? So it's political will.
I think one of the things we need to understand too is that we are not just representatives of an electoral district. You are representatives of the whole of Tobago, hence portfolios like secretaries and those sort of things. So that the systems for operating at your level, whether it's within your electoral district, you need to have systems set up that deals with how the work ought to be done in your district, while at the same time you are performing the work for the bigger community of Tobago through the secretarial positions. So that it means things like district assemblies that we will be instituting and the IDA at the community levels. And that is why participation becomes very key, because it means community people need to be involved in the process, absent of the partisan politics that we see play out in village councils, but that they are empowered to look after the interests of their community. It doesn't matter if the people in their community wear red, purple, or black.
All right, Pastor Baines,
community,
I know Pastor Baines has been very patient. Yes, you wanted to come in there from very early. You go ahead.
Well, I agree. I am a perennial optimist. I don't necessarily. I mean, I don't agree necessarily with Mr. George that about things going to remain the same because of the timeline. I believe if you have the political will, just as Natisha said, if you have the political will to do a thing, you will find a way to do it. Human beings are designed like that.
Yes.
They're designed like that. I don't also agree, trying to get in earlier, of Mr. George's generalization about politicians being opportunistic. I don't agree with that because that can be a presumptuous position to have. You understand? I think that we have signaled as an organization that our approach would be that we will provide for each constituency regardless of whether you are PDP or whoever you be. And there will be the proper kind of governance set up at that subordinate level to treat with those things. So you see, providing representation for your constituency don't mean you have to be there every day. You set up the system so that the people can represent you. All the people want is this service. They may necessarily want to see you every day in no suit. They want to be able to get the service. And once we have the system set up so that they can get the service, I think that we're going to be all right. We are actually charting a new kind of course because that's not how it has been done generally. But you have to attempt new things. It's 2021. We're dealing with COVID-19 and its attendant issues and so on. We have to attempt some new things. And the lamentation in the various constituencies is people still can't get basic service. I mean, in 2021, a man still fussing about a pothole in front of their house and them kind of thing in 2021. You understand what I'm saying? So we have some work to do, but with the kind of political will that I see among us, I believe that we can get the job done. If we remain pessimistic, we are not going to do anything different. We have to find a way. And I have seen in the last, 10 months or so, you have 6 PDP assemblymen locked out of state resources and so on, and we could have moved and find some innovative way to have our protests and that kind of thing. But we find ways to still serve our communities wherever way we can. And I believe that there's a certain amount of goodness in people to assess you based on where you are and what you can deliver to them. Most people are not unreasonable. And we made a point earlier about, there are some of us who may not have been in the governance place, so we cannot be judged there, but people can assess you based on your activity outside of governance. You understand? And why people will choose you, it has to be something that you have been doing in the community. Somehow the people know you and know something about you. There are some traits that you possess that can say to them, listen, this man can be, or woman can be a good representative for us. Final thing, we have to come back to the original definition of representation, right? Representation in a very common way. People have something to do. All of them can't go in town to get it done together. They pick one man or one woman and they sit you down and tell you, listen, this is what we want. We want you to go wrong in Bacalet and we want you to pick up that. We want you to go up on the hill, up by the fort, pick up that. We want you to do all these things. So you, the individual, have to have all the things that the people send you to get done. And you understand. And we have said that our governance model will be people before politics. Therefore, the traditional partisanship, while it may have its value, but it cannot be the center stage. It has to be secondary to the other things that we're talking about, trying to get this service to the people. And I believe that we have a team and our philosophy towards governance can bring us to that place. I believe that. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I can jump off from Pastor Baines. It also means that we need to see communities from different perspectives. Your community cannot just be defined as a geographical community. You have in the Tobago space communities that are sectors. You have your business community, you have your civil community. So seeing how people would have performed is not just how they would have performed in a quote unquote physical community space, but in what area of their endeavors they may have been. How did they champion the cause? How did they commit and broaden the scope of those other communities they have been involved in?
All right.
So
one of the follow-up questions I want to ask in terms of including and representing people, and I think we would have heard some references to it. People have concerns over the fact regarding spending. And it seems like as a people, we only hear about spending in large quantities after the fact. Should either of you, whether the IDA or the PDP, get into the administration, the question I would want to put forward is, how are you going to present a scenario where people are better aware of spending that is happening from the government's purse?
Well, the IDA will be having quarterly meetings every quarter. And as a result of that, and those are going to be town meetings in all the communities. And as a result of that, there is going to be contribution from every single person that wants to attend these meetings. And so they would not only know what we intend to do, but they will have an idea of how much we intend to spend on doing all these things. And so you won't have that situation where all of a sudden somebody hands us the taxpayer bill and says, listen, $20 million to build this little small establishment or what have you. And of course, we have a political leader that does have that kind of experience to find herself not falling into the traps of paying too much for any particular thing. And that is very important to take note of in these troubling economic times that we are in and seems to be ahead of us. That experience is something that cannot be substituted.
All right. Natisha or Pastor Baines, tell us the perspective of the PDP when it comes to that, increased transparency.
Yes, I mean, I think that is one of our watchwords in all that we've been saying. We have a kind of subculture in Tobago too, where everything does just cost a whole lot of money. You know, the smallest of things, and we have a value for dollar crisis. You understand? You know, and I learned a valuable lesson a couple months ago, executing a project there in the Switzerland's area. I mean, seriously, I have never done anything like that before. The residents say they want some light in a park, and I sat down and said, but what can we do? And I came up with this idea, you know what, which is what I learned from church, that you lead from the front. If you want to get something done, you take the lead. So I say, you know what, let me buy the first light and install it and so on, and then invite people from the community and friends and so on, and let's see if we could get the thing done. I was shocked at how we were able to do something like that, and it didn't reach $20,000. And I was like, I tried to even join on the cultural spending in Tobago and assess that, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, if that was done like in like the public service, that was costing triple time that. You understand? So I think the real issue that we're talking about tonight about getting people participation feeds into that as well. This helps you with astute spending and so on of the public purse as well. It helps to bring more responsible budgeting and financial activity and so on and all those kinds of things. So I know that is something that we have been talking about. That is part of our mantra, that we intend to make sure that the population get value for money. We intend to make sure that there is transparency in what we do with the people's money. That is something that is entrenched in what we're going to do. And I believe that when we execute this, that we are going to see a different landscape in the Tobago space.
And it speaks
So
to going back
just before we go there, Kay, because we're coming to that crunch time, and I know we have a lot to get in. But I want you and Natisha to answer this question. We have a question coming in from the viewers online here that speaks to, if successful at the polls, how will your party set about with the development of the various communities, including jumpstarting the social aspects, especially as we try to come out from this pandemic? So 1 minute to you, Kay, 1 minute to Natisha. Tell me, how will your party respond to developing our various communities, jumpstarting things coming out of this pandemic?
All of our plans, sorry, Kay, all of our plans will stem from the experiences and the opinions of the people within the district. So on the trail, you meet people who are artists, you meet people who good in the culinary arts, you meet people in trade, you meet people in carnival industry, in the carnival industry. You meet people with so many skills and talents out there. And that is why the PDP has been saying, let us do a community, let us form a community participatory budget so that we can pump money. When I say we, the Executive Council approves it and distribute the money, decentralize the spending, so that you create industries within the villages, and the THA will provide oversight. That way, people will be more involved in what happens in the community in terms of development, right? So that is one of the ideas that the PDP would like to go forward with, should we be successful at the polls.
All right, Kay, tell us about the ideas philosophy.
Community, meet with your community, but also start with an audit. We need to know what our communities have. We take for granted in the space that we call that we know what is there. And most of the times we really do not have a full understanding of what is there in the various spaces of our community. And therefore, how we can now use what is there to fashion appropriate types of development within the communities. We also would look at the need to make sure that whatever development is happening happens in an integrative manner, meaning when you look at the different pillars of the economy, whether we are looking at health, whether we are looking at agriculture, whether we are looking at tourism, we are not just focusing on them in isolation and as satellites, but the idea would be focusing on them from an integrative approach in terms of the impact they would have on other sectors. So you will be developing something in tourism that will pull from agriculture, that will pull from your health sector, so that everything is rising at the same time and having that impact at the same time. We'd also encourage community type organizations and networks aimed at resolving some of the issues in terms of problems, but also aim at creating some of the opportunities that happen. The communities is where it happens. You usually say that small businesses are the engine of societies. We look at them from the community level as well and build the capacity within the community, meeting the folks where they're at, using what they have. As an example, we have so many fruit trees around our island. Why it is every season we see mangoes wasting or different fruits wasting. Those are the various communities. If you do your audit, you see what communities are bringing to the table and use those resources to now craft different sort of cooperatives, business partnerships. That spells jobs. You look at empty spaces that we have in our community, you pull a relationship between civil society, the community people, and the business sector to create opportunities for jobs that they don't have to depend on the state to give them jobs. So we are going to start at the community level with an audit, with meeting the folks in our first 100 years and 400 days and planning the steps forward. And it goes back to that people involvement, involving them from the beginning. It is not going to be a snap your finger and it happens. The engine has to rub together, and therefore the stakeholders of the state, the political party, and the people on the ground, we have to work together, and we're going to be bringing that together to start the process.
All right. So again, as we're beginning to wind down with the time, a few minutes left there. And, we're speaking to people participation. And I'm really interested to hear from both of our political parties. I have heard a number of strategies to try to get people involved. But one of the questions I want to speak to is, how would we get individuals to be more interested in the governance of Tobago? It's one thing to put the structures in place to say we're going to have community meetings and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But is there anything specific that the parties are looking at so as to get persons more interested in the governance of the island? Leroy?
Well, what the IDA does, we have IDA Live, a Facebook Live every Thursday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m. And one of the things that we do, we allow persons to call in. That is something I've not seen on the Tobago political landscape with other political parties that have their lives, etc. And as a result of them being able to call in, and they could call in from very early in the program, as a result of that, while we are developing our ideas, while we are putting out our ideas out there, we are allowing consultation to take place. And in an environment which party don't feel necessarily stressed to be an academic or anything like that, but to voice your opinion in even the most basic of language. So we are accommodating and speaking the same language with our callers, with the general population of Tobago. That's one of the things that we specifically are doing at this time in order to get the people of Tobago more involved in the conversations that are taking place in our political landscape.
All right, Pastor Bain, same question to you, 30 seconds. How do you get people more interested? How are you going to get people more interested?
I believe that you, the official, have to really develop a relationship with the constituents that you're trying to serve, because there's a lot of distrust and a lot of disconnect. I mean, before you could even come to interest, people just distrust so much officials. So the building of a relationship is of paramount importance in my view. And I believe that it is from there, then you work on some of the others. And because there are some people have several other things to deal with before they even come to get interest in the politics. Now, they have so much other social concerns or physical concerns that they have to address. And I think the relationship, which is going to directly impact the integrity of the representation, I believe that that is one of the places that we need to begin. And if we do that well, then I believe eventually interest will catch on as we go further.
All right. So folks, we enter that segment of closing comments, 30 seconds each. We begin with you, Kate Trotman, IDA representative for Bonaccord Crown Point.
I believe when you give people the ability to voice their perspectives and to see it actually being used and put into practice and giving credit for it. This idea came from a community. This is what they contributed. This is how it was. They have the buy-in and they would do. So people participation is critical. And I want to tell the population of Tobago, don't feel disenchanted because of the years of so-called abuse by politicians. Do not feel so disenchanted that you throw away your franchise come December 6th. This is the only opportunity you are going to have in the short term to make the difference and the change that you want to see for yourself and for your children. So go to the polls on December 6th and exercise the franchise to make the change. That is the start of the difference that will take us to where we want to go.
All right, Natisha Charles Pantin, PDP representative for Bagatelle Bacolet. Closing comments, 30 seconds.
Yes, I would like people to think about legacy. Think about your legacy, think about your future generation. Think about the next 4 years, what you would like to see. Think about all the things, or current, like the current economic situation. Think about just how your community, the state of your community. I believe that if we all come together as a community and work on this, we will achieve what we want to achieve together. And let me throw in our, tagline, come, let me fix this.
All right. Leroy George, my Scarborough Second alumni, past colleague, still classmate, ideal candidate for Lambo Lowlands. Your 30 seconds to wrap up.
Okay, so writing is formalized thought. And as a result of that, we don't just want to consult with the people, but we want to put some of that consultation into writing. And that's why we're going to be implementing a lot of petitions. We're going to be building a culture of petitions here in Tobago so that on a regular basis, the decisions that are made in Tobago are made by everyday Tobagonians in contrast to just representatives in the House of Assembly.
All right, and finally, Assemblyman Terence Baines, PDP candidate for Bethel, Newgrange.
A great orator says that the things that bother you the most oftentimes are the things that you are put here to change. And there are many people that are dissatisfied with what is taking place in the space and the governance landscape. And we have an opportunity, just as Kay says, to be a part of the change that we want to see realized. Too many people stay away from the process and complain that the process is not working. So we want to encourage every single Tobagonian that has been afforded this constitutional right to go out to the polls on December 6th and exercise your franchise for the government of your choosing. We prefer that you vote for the PDP, but you have the right to choose.
All right. Thank you very much to all our panelists here, as well as thank you to the viewers. I am Hulien Skeete. It has certainly been a pleasure being the moderator for this session. Even if all the speakers may not have always gotten to give their full views, we had limited time. So I trust that all would understand we had to work within the limitations that we had before us. We extend our appreciations and we invite you to continue to tune in to conversations with the candidates. This evening, we were discussing people participation and imperative for good governance hosted by the Tobago CivilNet. And we want to just remind you that we continue to talk with the candidates for the THA elections and that the CivilNet is a non-partisan group of the Tobago civil society organizations and concerned citizens all combining forces for the purpose of having collective input on Tobago's development. Thank you very much, viewers. Thank you to all the candidates that have participated thus far. This has been Conversations with the Candidates, hosted by the Tobago CivilNet. Have a great evening, folks.